obstacle in her life too, because it's her family that's been affected by everything, and she's still fortunate enough to still be able to do what she's loved to do for years. She's one of the more experienced divas, and obviously she's going to carry on the legacy of the Bella Twins for the time being until we see an obvious reunion in the very near future, and that's when we're going to be seeing storylines where Nikki and Brie Bella don't hate anybody anymore being thrown out the window. Remember that storyline when Nikki and Brie Bella couldn't stand each other because of Stephanie being a huge influence? Well, all that is going to be thrown out the window, and if anything, we're going to be seeing a Bella Twins reunion when, say, Brie Bella is in a compromised position at the hands of probably Becky Lynch and Charlotte or Paige, something like that. A team is going to team up on Brie Bella, and then out of nowhere, here comes Nikki Bella, and the crowd explodes and goes crazy over the return of Nikki Bella, which obviously will be apparent, and we know it's apparent, we just don't know when. It's going to be happening, because these things like neck injuries are very difficult to predict. You can't really put a timeline on when we're going to be seeing Nikki Bella making a return, because like I said, off of an injury like this, you're never the same. No matter how many times you break your neck, each time you do, you're never the same more and more every time it happens. And some wrestlers over the years that I've known have broken their necks more times than ever given credit for, like Stone Cold Steve Austin, Edge, Chris Benoit, some of the names that I threw your way there. I can't really recall a time, though, when a diva similar to Nikki Bella broke their neck. So this could be the first of an injury like this that we've kind of ever heard about. So there's a lot of courage that goes with it. Not to say that it hasn't happened before, because it probably has throughout the history of wrestling, because a number of divas that are never given enough credit have suffered from major injuries that have taken them out of action for a really long time. There may be one of these injuries that have kind of undermined it and overshadowed, and I don't mean to do that if I'm not bringing it up. But the thing is, this injury is very challenging. This is a very difficult injury. As I said here earlier, one of the more difficult injuries that anyone should ever have to deal with. And it's very unfortunate that Nikki Bella, at the peak and prime of her career in her life, had to go through something like this. And, like I said, it takes a lot of courage to go on Twitter and tweet about this sort of thing when you probably don't even want to update your fans on your status, because you're kind of worried about what the response is going to be. You're kind of frightened about how they're going to react. Both a response and a reaction, but the reaction to Nikki Bella's surgery and broken neck has been nothing but supportive from her fans, more especially, who are never given enough credit. You guys deserve all the credit in the world for just being there for Nikki Bella, and the divas showing their love for Nikki Bella has been incredible too, because without this love and support, I don't think that Nikki Bella would be in the position that she's in right now. She probably would be in a darker place, in a more uncertain place, a place of uncertainty, if not for this love and support that we have seen from her fans and her friends that she's worked with in the Divas division for a number of years. I don't think we've ever seen closer bonds and friendships that have been created in professional wrestling than we've seen in the Divas division. We hear about politics in professional wrestling, and being around politics with professional wrestling for years is something that I've become familiarized with for forever. And you hear enough about politics in the male locker room, and you don't really hear a lot of that in the female locker room. You do, but you hear about it more in the male locker room than you ever have in the female locker room. Every once in a while, you'll have a dispute or an argument happening between divas about how this diva can't stand this diva, or this diva hates this diva, and this diva hates that diva. You hear about it all the time, but you don't hear about it as much as what you do in the male locker room because of the politics. One wrestler wants to be on top, wants to be getting ahead of the other, and it never seems to die down. But it seems like in the Divas locker room, there's more of a closer bond, and that's why we see such great chemistry with whoever you put in the ring up against each other. And that's why I think Nikki Bella, offered so much to this division, because, she had bonds with everybody in the locker room, and she was just given this opportunity to create, which I think she took full advantage of. And if there ever was someone who was inspiring in that division, it obviously was Nikki Bella, who you can't help but be extremely proud of for everything that she has done. She's a multi-time winner of the Divas Championship, and she has just done so much. This reality show, Total Divas, she was a huge factor on that. Obviously, she's going to continue to do stuff with that and probably the network in her absence. So obviously, it's just a matter of WWE coming up with different things for someone like Nikki Bella to do. It's just going to be very hard for her to come up with things for her to do, and WWE creative for her to do, because of what happened to her. Because like I said, a neck injury is one of the more scarier injuries that anyone should have to go through and have to put up with, and that's why I wish Nikki Bella definitely a very speedy and very effective recovery, which they are predicting she's going to have. The same thing about Bret Hart. Apparently now he's 99% sure, after being in doubt about his surgery for his cancer, his prostate cancer, of course, which he posted about on Twitter, saying he was going through a very difficult time. It was really frightening, and it was a very challenging thing for him to have to overcome. But apparently now, they're saying as of Monday night that his surgery was successful, and he's 99% sure that he's going to continue to have a very prosperous life. I'm looking forward to a very promising outcome from everything that's happened for him in recent weeks. Although it's not 100% sure, there still has to be the doubt in the back of his mind whether or not he's going to be able to pull through. But because he's the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be, not wanting to let any of his fans down, he promises us that we will see him again sometime in the very near future. So we do have promising outlooks from all the unfortunate stuff that we heard about early on in 2016. Bret Hart's cancer, prostate cancer, of course, affecting him. That was one of the top stories of the year early on. And Nikki Bella's neck surgery and broken neck was definitely one of the top 3 news stories, if not top 5, of 2016. So I just thought I would give you somewhat of a little bit of an update on the surgery of Nikki Bella and how things went for her, which I think is going to see a very promising future in all of its fallout in the very near future. I can't put a timeline on when Nikki Bella is going to return. If I had to say when I think she will return, it'll be around, say, either SummerSlam, and if not then, sometime within the next year. So when is this March? By March of 2017, the first or second week of March of 2017, if it's not by SummerSlam, that's when we will see Nikki Bella returning, because a neck injury is one of the more difficult ones to come back off of. And like I said many times in the past, and I'll say it to you now, you're never the same after a neck injury, especially a neck injury that you didn't know anything about. And oftentimes in wrestling, it doesn't happen very often, but oftentimes we see these kind of injuries and we see these wrestlers coming back and they're never the same after it. But can you imagine how difficult it's going to be for Nikki Bella to be the same off of an injury that she didn't know anything about, which is something of extreme rarity that never happens. We never hear about injuries that doctors don't diagnose or don't know anything about. Daniel Bryan was one of the first ones when talking about a male performer that they didn't know anything about. They didn't really know what Daniel Bryan had wrong with him. They couldn't put a diagnosis on it, and a couple of weeks before he was called back to go to wrestling again for WWE, they found out something with his brain having to do with concussions, saying that if he had any more, he would die possibly, so he had to retire. And now this surgery for Nikki Bella, you're never going to be the same off this sort of thing, so there's still a lot of uncertainty that goes with it, but that's not to say that Nikki Bella will not have a very promising future and more reigns as champion. I think it's going to take some time before we do see her as Divas Champion. She deserves to be Divas Champion again, but, off this injury, it's going to take some time. So once she gets more confident being in the ring, because there's going to be that uncertainty, that cloud of uncertainty looming over her head for a very long time. Once that cloud of uncertainty moves out, then we're going to probably see a third or a fourth reign for her as Divas Champion. We've already seen Brie as Divas Champion. Let's give Nikki Bella some more promising reigns as Divas Champion, and let's see how much she can create, which I would imagine is going to be a lot. Fun times are definitely ahead for her, and while she's out of the ring, there still is the opportunity to create with reality shows like Total Divas and shows for the network too, like WWE Road Trip. I'd love to see something done with the Bella Twins on that show, because that show has a tremendous cast. One of the newer shows to premiere recently on WWE Network, even Renee Young is on there. So there's a lot going on, and there's a lot of opportunities outside of the ring for Nikki Bella. Probably more opportunities than there were, definitely, without question, from 10 years ago, when you didn't have the network to create and didn't have the opportunity to still have exposure outside of the ring while you were rehabilitating from your injury, which obviously Nikki Bella is going to have to do a significant amount of. So that's why I think there's more of a promising future than there probably would have been 10 years ago. Probably a more promising outlook for rehabilitation for Nikki Bella than ever has been seen before. And I think this is one of the more difficult injuries a diva has ever had to rebound off of. We've heard about these injuries kind of before. I think Lita had something similar to this one. I think back on it back in the early thousands, and she got a lot of support for it. And I think that Nikki Bella is getting even more here in 2016. But definitely one of the more difficult injuries for a diva to have to rebound off of, and that's why we're seeing and hearing about so much support from either fans or people that she has worked with, her co-workers in the Divas division, showing her so much support with their tweets on Twitter and their posts on their Facebook pages, which you cannot be thankful enough for, because without that support, where would someone like Nikki Bella be? You can't look, but you can't touch, but this is one of the more promising stories to come out of professional wrestling early on here in 2016, and that's why I think we have to be really excited for the future of Nikki Bella, which definitely looks very promising. If you have a thought or get well wishes for Nikki Bella, you can tweet her on Twitter at Nikki Bella, and of course you can tweet me On my Twitter at Jonathan Clarke1, on Facebook at HEW Entertainment with over 1,500 subscribers, and on my YouTube channel, you can give me a thought if you have one in the comments of this video at Jonathan Clarke22, which I will be archiving for you. Until next week, I'm your host, Jonathan Clarke. Good luck to Nikki Bella, and I will talk to you really soon.
Like what you hear? Tell us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube.